Well, this brings us to the next contribution. And now we are focusing on the questions relating to the powers behind SMRs. In the morning we focused on technical questions. So why a technology that cannot be implemented, as has been illustrated? Why is this technology promoted so much? First of all, Günter Hermeyer will present it. He is an anti-nuclear climate and human rights activist for decades, because Günter also has been active since the 1980s, because he also joined the protests against Gorleben and Wackersdorf. And then listening to him, then we really feel the power of the then governor, minister, Franz Josef Strauss, used to beat down, so to speak, the protest in Wackersdorf. Although you actually suffered a lot, but I would like to put it into the center as a positive example, because here Wackersdorf clearly illustrates what civilian disobedience and protest achieve. So the wastewaters that left Wackersdorf would not have been led to the sea like Zellersdorf, but the discharged waters would have been led directly into the Danube. Unfortunately, this was prevented, and we must not forget what they have achieved. Particularly at a time when you hear you cannot do anything, the powers that are much too powerful. Civilian resistance can achieve something, and this has been illustrated by Wackersdorf. As mentioned before, Günter was active in Wackersdorf decades ago, and since then he has held several positions in the anti-nuclear movement, has contributed to a wide range of initiatives, and since 2017 he has been a delegate with the COP, the UN Climate Conferences. It was the COP23 in Bonn in 2017. He was there, so representing Don't Nuke the Climate. This is an NGO, and he's a co-founder of this NGO. And since then, 5 climate conferences have been held, and he got some detailed insights into the lobbyism we see at all these COP conferences. And Günter will discuss the blatant hijacking of the climate conferences by the nuclear lobby. Günter, the floor is yours.
Ja, kurz vorab, das war fast richtig, was der Kollege Herbert gesagt hat.
What Herbert said was almost correct. This is a campaign. This is no NGO. It is a group of several initiatives worldwide that formed long before 2017, long before the COP23. So Don't Nuke the Climate was launched long before, and since Bonn we expanded this campaign so across Germany. We also organized a demonstration in Bonn. A civil society structure was developed, under which lots of events were held, and we always try to involve a large number of international representatives, so frontline communities that are the first to be impacted by this extractivist system, the nuclear industry, since we always tend to forget that this embellishment is something we have seen also in connection with major nuclear power plants in Germany. Beautiful pictures, beautiful representations, meadows, cows. So the narrative is to be changed, and they try to paint a lovely new world. And we want to counter this visualization with our campaign, and this is as a brief description. The website, this is what you see about us on the website, just to represent our structure. And in connection with the Climate Conference in Bonn, we collected the signatures. Some 500 organizations worldwide signed that. And in Glasgow, in connection with COP26, we did that. We had just 500 NGOs from around the world that endorsed the campaign, and we focus on that. So these are the key words. Nuclear energy is too dirty, too dangerous, too expensive, and too slow. And this is the reason why it cannot work as a solution to counter global warming, for instance. And this was in Katowice, COP24. This was the presentation of this Harmony Goal. The World Nuclear Association presented the Harmony Goal in a major event. And what you see here is this Harmony Goal is to achieve that by 2050, 25% of the world's electricity will stem from nuclear energy. This would be some 1,000 gigawatt of new nuclear capacity that is to be built. And we know that if you have 1 gigabyte, this is 900 to 1,000 major nuclear power plants. I mean, this leads everything ad absurdum. I mean, who is to finance and build all that? This solution is not compatible, is not reasonable. And these are some statements from IAI, statements presented at COP27 and 26, for instance, and I will discuss that a bit later on. This narrative, this change they try to bring about, that they always claim that nuclear energy is such an important player when it comes to ensuring that our Western civilization can be maintained. And I had some problems then when I gave him this nickname, but at COP26 there was really the red carpet for Mr. Grossi, and at the opening there was a 40-minute interview, and the moderator was an American journalist. And listening to what was said, you can just say it was a huge propaganda show. We would have loved to be asked after Mr. Grossi, because the responses would have been quite different. And let me pick out one, because this relates to my home country. It's about what to do with the nuclear waste. This is no problem at all, because the entire nuclear waste would fit into a small room we sit in. And this is absolute nonsense. The room was the size half of the blue containers you see in the background. And this is some 20 kilometers far from where I live in Gorleben, in a forest. And they do not know what to do with that. And the situation is that the permission will end in 2035, and then we have to find some other place where to put these containers. And there's a major discussion ongoing in Germany. They do not know what to do with these containers. So now the entire procedure has been started anew, and we are sure that by the end of 2030 we will not be able to find an appropriate site for the final repository. 2 papers published by the IAEA, and they speak about the net zero world, and that they require nuclear science and technology to make sure to counter this climate crisis. And this is their magazines, their papers. And over the last few years, we have seen a further development. This is, in fact, the COP is a major fair, and this is the IAEA pavilion, and this was in Sharm el-Sheikh, and they show that they provide nuclear solutions for climate change. They represent themselves in the most positive colors, that they solve these climate-related issues. And this is just some statements given by Mr. Grossi, and he is, really like the man of the propaganda. And this is what he says, that nuclear power delivers stable and reliable low-carbon electricity. And it's always good to attend the Global Climate Summit, because there are lots of high-level institutions represented there. And here, what you see here, for instance, is the nuclear power plant in Turkey, and this is really on the margins of an earthquake zone. And since he always talks about sustainable, and they are always trying to present the nuclear industry as sustainable, and this is about charging this nuclear power plant and installing it. And in this connection, Putin welcomed Turkey as a member of the civilized world now that they commissioned this reactor. So just imagine that. And the next topic is
the next topic is one of resilience and reliability, seen against the background of the challenges posed by climate change, like rising sea levels, droughts, etc. And I actually found 2 or 3 statements of the World Meteorological Organization, which give us a fundamental insight into the climate, taking us to more risky areas in terms of water on the world. Water is withdrawing. We've seen things happen when nuclear power plants in France had to be shut down, not just because of a lack of water, but basically we can actually sense that in the future rivers will have less water and will become too warm. Something like that happened because the River Weser in Germany was too warm during the summer, and the power plant couldn't be run because the cooling didn't work quite as well. And it's not just falling water levels, but also storms and rising sea levels. Weather-related flooding is a case in point. Many NPPs are close to the shore or on the shore. This one is in Finland. It was only built recently, and this is the statement that the IAEA made in this context. I was really annoyed by the picture that pretends that water systems can be protected by way of nuclear power, and that these structures should be created. There is a French NGO which formed after the accident in Chernobyl. They do measurements in the Bay of Biscay and right up through the English Channel up to Denmark, the Danish islands. I don't know whether you're familiar with the OSPAR Convention, combined from Oslo and Paris. And actually, it was foreseen that by 2020, a structure would be in place to reduce radioactive discharges into the sea to levels close to zero. But this was shifted to 2050 at a meeting in Portugal, so they just added 30 years. And you can imagine who is behind that extension of the deadline or the shift. OSPAR drew up this report, which refers to discharges from nuclear installations, not just Laag, but also Sellafield. It's decommissioned, but if you look at the Irish Sea and do the measurements, and that would be the task of the IAEA to do that, I can well imagine that it would reveal some surprising results, but it's not done anyway. So remember what the IAEA said about protecting important ecosystems. So this is one of our demands, that the IAEA should actually take care of that. I don't know if you recall this. There were massive Greenpeace protests because barrels of nuclear waste were buried in the English Channel. The same goes for the North Atlantic, where the Swiss and the Americans also buried or dumped really barrels of nuclear waste. This is from the Greenpeace research that dealt with the English Channel, but you can find similar things in the Bay of Biscay and in the North Atlantic and in Ostende. Plutonium was found on the shore, and it can also be found in fish. This is a barrel that looks quite well conserved. They don't all look the same, and the IAEA should take care of that. This is a picture from COP27, an interesting picture because the man next to Mr. Grossi is Mr. Müller, and he was a Minister of Development Aid, and I was a bit surprised that they would be sitting on the panel together, but thanks to Mr. Müller's good contacts, his network, it was quite useful, and what was said was that the countries of the Global South could actually be helped avoid CO2 emissions by adding them to the nuclear family right away. Of course, you never know what is happening behind the scenes. Again, a card that was disseminated by the Nuclear Energy Agency, where again a tripling of installations is called for, and they clearly also call for longer operations of older nuclear power plants like those in France. This is the young generation, the Nuclear Lobby Young movement, who are also doing very intensive work on COP meetings, and they are better funded than us. This is my colleague Leonie Morden from Arizona. She's a member of a frontline community where nuclear installation, mining was ripe for decades. Nothing was renatured. The open mines are still there. And the nuclear young movement actually tries to depict itself, or likes to depict itself, as an association in its own right. But this is what you then find when you look up the people on the IAEA site before the COP. Of course, we don't have the accreditation status that the people in the left-hand column have. So you know that this is definitely a grassroots organization. I really don't know why this picture is missing on my slide, but it was a picture I took at COP27. It was a large screen showing technical solutions, and it was always about technical solutions, nothing else, not about changing your lifestyle with decarbonized systems, it was always about technical solutions. And then the next stage is the green hydrogen stands and the green hydrogen's representatives. It's also something that the nuclear lobby likes to see. Hydrogen being produced with nuclear energy to be called green hydrogen. I think it's pink hydrogen at the moment, but they would like it to be called green hydrogen. Mr. Macron is all over the place about this type of hydrogen being classified as green. I really liked the picture that used to be on that slide. Sorry, does anybody know why this isn't shown? Anyway, there was a meeting of various organizations which want to produce hydrogen, and you could see the various joint ventures that also involved the nuclear industry. So they're actually joining forces, that's what I mean to say.
Das ist eine Frage, die sich viele Leute halt gerade stellen, vor allen Dingen Leute, die
I actually can't access my presentation, so I would ask you to change the slides for me. Thank you. Herbert mentioned that I've been an activist dealing with these matters for about 40 years now. And this is a picture from Sharm el-Sheikh. The question that arises is that we're faced with a wave of nuclear lobbyism. And how can you, as a small structure of volunteers, still counter such a well-positioned, well-paid opponent? It's a question that a lot of people are asking themselves. People who are about my age. For the young, the situation is seen in an entirely different light, because the change of narrative has arrived, and many young people think that the nuclear industry is actually a potential way out of the climate crisis. But there are a few positive examples and a few success stories. This was in 2019. It was in Madrid when Svenja Schulze was Minister of the Environment, and this group actually wanted the taxonomy discussion to be done in a more differentiating way. However, it didn't really work out, because in Glasgow the tables turned because of the fact that the EU elections were ahead of us at the time. This is again from Sharm el-Sheikh, the European Green Deal, which builds on business as usual, as carrying on as we've worked in the past, and working with nuclear options rather than renewable sources, just the way the nuclear industry would like to see. There was a very strong group from the African civil society. That was a lot of fun too. In a country like Egypt, it wasn't possible to organize your own events or build your own structures. We were only able to do that within the actual COP premises, because it's not Egyptian territory, and it was UN territory for the time for as long as the COP lasted, and we were safer there. The Egyptian government also caused quite some turmoil in the German pavilion, and we were also spied on, but I don't want to go into detail about that. We're not staying within no nuke structures, so we're also trying to network with others who support the civil society. For example, Climate Justice Alliance, this was one of the events we organized there. And I would now like to move on to something that is very important, and that is the potential of strikes on nuclear reactors, civilian nuclear reactors. This is an Al Jazeera report referring to the nuclear power plants you see in on this map, and basically, there is, of course, a chance that either terrorists or governmental structures attack civilian nuclear reactors. It's happened before. There is this conflict between Iran and Israel, for example. The report assumes that it's only happening in this region of the world, but, and this is the report, which is very very detailed. Actually, emissions were calculated taking into account the direction of the wind in that area. And basically, this does bring us to a different region of the world, because it's the situation in Ukraine. Mr. Grossi is sailing in unknown waters. Of course, it's not just Mr. Grossi, but it's a situation which nobody actually thought of, except for the report on Al Jazeera. And what we're seeing now is that Ukraine may see a new offensive, and when Mr. Müller and Mr. Grossi sat on the same panel in COP27, they actually said that it wasn't nuclear power plants that were the problem, and even Mr. Macron admitted that there is no such thing as purely civilian use of nuclear power. So people are really very worried because of the political situation. Evacuations have taken place. It could be another nuclear disaster. We don't exactly know where we're at. And here he is again, one of his most recent statements. He points out how urgent it is to protect the nuclear power plant, but he can't do that because he cannot get the parties to sit down at a table, even though it is absolutely horrid to have military action in this area. I actually compiled some more information for you. The first two Earls referred to videos about they're highly propagandistic, and the second video actually shows that Mr. Grossi was in Dubai and met the new president there, and they are actually clearly moving into a common direction. whatever the outcome will be. This is a picture we took in South Africa. It's my favorite close of a presentation because it shows that we work with the people on site, with the frontline communities, and we hope that we will be able to cooperate with them intensively in the future too. Thank you very much.
Weil wir keine Fragen gemacht haben, aber Oldrich hat ein bisschen überzogen. Du liegst gut in der Zeit. Danke.
Thank you, Günther, for these valuable insights. Well, in principle, it's quite positive that there is massive media coverage of the COPs, and Antonio Guterres speaks out words of warning. Highway to hell is what he said. I mean, the statement he gave at the last COP really shook people awake. So, because he has some power, yeah, but it would be nice if the things you showed would also be represented in the media, since you have been on site for so many years. Because for us as normal media consumers, it is so difficult to understand the underlying structures. Dear Günther, you wanted to take a seat, but well, Mr. Aldrich has spoken a bit longer than his time allotted, and so you thought that you could return to your seat, but you need to stay here for 5 minutes on the stage because there are 5 minutes for questions now. So if anybody has questions, please ask them now. Yes, and please be so kind and wait for the microphone.
That the world entered to nuclear age. So is it possible that nuclear age is the reason of global warming? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Klaus Martineric sagt Slovenia.
Global warming. I saw an article from NASA that the global warming began in 1950. Till then, temperature were in relation with sun activities. And from 1950, the temperature rise up and sun activities were the same as 1,000 years ago. What happened in 1950? I believe that only thing that happened was that the world entered to nuclear age. So is it possible that nuclear age is the reason of global warming?
Natürlich hat sie auf eine Art und Weise dazu beigetragen, dass sich das Klima verändert hat. Das hat sie ja auch unter anderem getan, weil die Gesellschaft in ihrem ganzen Ressourcenverbrauch, in ihrem ganzen Energieverbrauch immer mehr geworden ist. Deutsch, okay?
May I answer in German, please? Yeah, that's fine. Well, there are disputes ongoing about the CO2 levels emitted by nuclear energy, so the figures vary. It is about 100 grams per kilowatt hour, and well, these things they change in connection with the increasingly low level of uranium in the ore and the energy required. It's clear that nuclear energy emits less CO2 than coal for energy generation, coal plant. Well, it has not only contributed to climate change, but it has been able to do so because society has consumed increasingly more energy. If I as a family have 3 cars, then these cars also have to be produced. I require energy. Well, I might have had the energy based on nuclear power generation. And, well, yes, 3 vehicles emit more CO2. So if you haven't had any nuclear power plants and just coal power plant, then the CO2 levels emitted would have been higher. But as a global community, we are in a situation that is no longer sustainable. And this is a question we need to ask ourselves. And we need to find answers. We need to find genuine solutions. And we believe one of the best and fastest solutions answer would be to reduce emissions and ask yourself what has to be produced and what does not have to be produced. Although I'm well off, if I talk to our friend from Niger, Ali Mustafa, and if I see and hear how they live, then you do not have to ask yourself the question whether they will buy an e-vehicle. No, they will definitely be able to buy an e-vehicle. But this is how the discussion has been ongoing forever and ongoing. We talk about our living standards based on the new Green Deal, but we need to challenge our standards of living, and then we will be able to cope with that. And we will not be able to sustain our standard of living if we require nuclear energy for that. I would like to link up with the question. So if I use a nuclear power plant to generate energy, then the maximum level is 1/3 of the nuclear power is used, and 2/3 is just heat that is being discharged. Isn't the direct heat, this heat, an issue because we only focus on CO2 but not on the heating? And just consider on the fuel consumed in Austria per year, then we could heat up the lake Le Mans by 1 degree. And imagine if we had just a small country of Austria, and globally speaking, the nuclear power plants and the combustion of fossil fuels and gas, this is a lot. Then I believe that it is not only the increase in CO2 emissions, but the radiation, and also the radiation into outer space is something. But obviously this is not being considered. And have you ever heard about these various radiations and the role this plays? The thing is, systems are very complex, and the way they look at it is often much too simplified. If I have a solar power plant, and you also require CO2 emissions to build a solar power plant, but it doesn't have a cooling tower, and the cooling tower emits heat and radiates this heat into the atmosphere, and this is quite a high level of heat. And focusing on this extractorism, in Niger, for instance, the mines are being powered by a coal-powered plant in order to extract the uranium, and this also requires energy, and this also discharges heat, and the water that is being taken out, be it in the south of Australia, in Niger, and other desert areas. For instance, in Namibia, if you take away the water, and the water has a cooling function. If there is no water, then the soil heats up and the temperatures increase. And these are elements of a puzzle you need to focus on, but obviously they do not focus on this interplay between the individual elements. And as you mentioned, there are lots of things you need to focus on, and we're so annoyed when we are at the IAEA stall, and then we